I would submit that perhaps the way we should think of the Bitcoin to equity ratio, the benchmark for Bitcoin is not gold, but equities. And the question is, why can't there be parity between Bitcoin and equities? Why shouldn't we be talking about something more like 100 to 1? Which, of course, won't be as good as it sounds, because the fiat money will be worth a lot less, and it'll be taxed pretty heavily and whatnot. But I think, I'm still hopeful that if Bitcoin goes up by a factor of 100, you'll make some money, a modest amount of money, in real terms. Now, there are sort of, at the very minimum, what I think, it's always hard to know where Bitcoin goes from here. It's $43,000 today. Where does it go? What I like to say is that Bitcoin is always the most honest market in the world. It's the most efficient market, and it was the canary in the coal mine. It was telling us that the inflation was coming in the last 2 years, as it went from 6,000 up by a factor of 10x. It is telling us that the central banks are bankrupt, that we are at the end of the fiat money regime, and that's sort of what it has priced in. I think the central bankers, Mr. Powell, people like that, should be extremely grateful to Bitcoin, because it's the last warning they're going to get. They've chosen to ignore it, and they will have to pay the consequences for that in the years ahead. But let me come back to this question. Why has Bitcoin not yet gone to 100,000 to $1 million of Bitcoin? Why has it not yet converged with gold, or even with the equity markets more broadly? And what is it going to take for this to happen? And I know that sort of the ways we often talk about businesses or technologies is how great the technology is, how great the code is, how great the math is, how it's sort of innovative. But I want to sort of suggest that we should maybe think of it at least in one dimension as sort of a political question. And it's a movement, and it's a political question whether this movement is going to succeed, or whether the enemies of the movement are going to succeed in stopping us. And so I want to maybe end with an enemies list, a list of people who I think are stopping Bitcoin. And they all have, many of them have, there's sort of a lot of them. They tend to have this sort of nameless, faceless bureaucrat perspective, which is of course one of the ways they hide. But we're going to try to expose them and realize that this is sort of what we have to fight for Bitcoin to go 10x or 100x from here. So enemy number one. I think he's sort of. I think the sort of the sociopathic grandpa from Omaha is perhaps the most honest and the most direct in it, and you have to sort of think of it's of course on some level these people aren't always just talking their book. It's sort of they have some sort of institutional bias. It's long, a list of woke companies. It's somehow long this fiat money system, and of course there's always a sense if you're a money manager, you want to pretend that it's complicated to invest, and if all you have to do is buy Bitcoin, that's like ridiculous. All these people are out of business. There was a version of this also with gold. They never liked gold either, because if all you had to do was own gold, that's something everybody can do. But there's sort of an institutional bias, a sort of a center-left political bias. There's of course the New York City banker bias. Jamie Dimon, J.P. Morgan. You can get quotes like this from any number of these people. And then I would say, another one, even more obscure, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock. where if you have these sort of large institutional investors, they need to be allocating some of their money to Bitcoin. When they manage state pension funds in the US, or they get trillions of dollars in assets, when they choose not to allocate to Bitcoin, that is a deeply political choice, and we need to be pushing back on them. We need to say, you have to get on board on this. And the Larry Fink quote is sort of representative, I think, of a whole genre of anti-Bitcoin things where, and you have to always put it in some context, but pro-blockchain is an anti-Bitcoin term, very typically. So it's like, I love the blockchain, but not so sure about this Bitcoin, don't need Bitcoin, we can move on to the blockchain, move along, this is not, not the currency you're looking for, move along, move along. But if we sort of combine all of these things, I would sort of put the label on the sort of on the sort of the label they've come up with, and perhaps the real enemy is ESG, and which it's always sort of unclear what it means. You might think of it as not charitable for me to sort of name some enemies here, but I think that ESG is just a hate factory. It's a factory for naming enemies, and we should not be allowing them to do that. Or that, of course, you can sort of always ask the question, what's the difference between ESG and CCP, the Chinese Communist Party? They are into social and governance. Environmental is sort of fake. It's probably also fake in a lot of these cases, but I always think when you think ESG, you should be thinking CCP, and there's some degree, and it's been a surprise. ESG has been surprisingly inclusive. Basically, as far as I can tell, the only things that are sort of not liked are some of the carbon industries, and then Bitcoin. And it's because most of the other companies, they are subject to political control, especially when your companies go public. I always advise CEOs when they take their companies public. There's some good things. You get liquidity. You can, the early investors can cash out. You can get some credibility. But it's basically taking a company public. It's a de facto government takeover where some people who are effectively government bureaucrats became more empowered. It's the CFO, the general counsel, the accountants, the lawyers, the HR people. All these sort of extensions of the state are given more power, and we have to think of ESG as sort of this vast umbrella thing, and we're sort of one of the great features of Bitcoin, and it's always a question whether it's a bug or a feature, but I would submit that in the sort of more heavy-handed statist world, it is far more of a feature than a bug, is that Bitcoin is not a company. It does not have a board. We do not know who Satoshi is. And in some ways, all these things seemed extreme in the world of the 2010s where the inflation was low, the regulations were not the worst, and it seems extremely prescient for the world of the 2020s. And if we had to summarize this in one frame, it is the finance gerontocracy that runs the country through whatever silly virtue signaling / hate factory term like ESG they have, versus what I would call what we have to think of as a revolutionary youth movement. And we have to just go out from this conference and take over the world.